World Scout organization has announced an early departure of all Jamboree participants from the Saemangeum campsite due to a typhoon approaching South Korea. President Yoon Suk-yeol and the authorities are coming up with a contingency plan. Japanese media report Tokyo could start releasing Fukushima wastewater this month after the leaders of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan meet next week in Washington. The Korean government says the timing is Tokyo's decision. The Korean economy is gradually picking up on the back of recovering chip exports, says the nation's state-run think tank. It's August 7th, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We'll start with the news of the World Scout Jamboree being cut short due to a typhoon approaching the Korean peninsula. This comes on the heels of this year's Jamboree going through a rough patch, from heat problems to hygiene issues. The Korean government is coming up with contingency plans. Our Choi Soo-young begins our coverage.
On Monday morning, the 7th day of the 25th World Scout Jamboree in Saemangeum, the world organization of the Scout movement made a decision to expedite the departure of all participants from the campsite due to the anticipated impact of Typhoon Hyo-joo. According to officials, the Scout teams are expected to departure the campgrounds gradually, starting at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 8th. Over 1,000 buses, interpreters, police officers and emergency service personnel will be mobilized to move the Scouts safely. On the 6th day, the Korean Meteorological Administration stated that Typhoon Hyo-joo was projected to move through Okinawa, Japan and Taiwan before heading northeast toward the eastern part of China. However, on August 7th, it was forecasted to pass the northeastern waters of Okinawa and make landfall in Busan on the 10th before crossing through Korea. Considering the predicted path of the typhoon, it is expected to affect the Saemangeum Jamboree site in Byeong-hun County, Jeollabuk-do Province from Wednesday. The World Scout organization said they made this decision to prioritize the safety of all the participants and continued its close collaboration with the Korea Scout Association and the South Korean government. South Korean government informed that they will soon provide a contingency plan for the departure and the venues that will host the participants. The accommodations and venues for the remaining events will be relocated to various places in Seoul and the metropolitan area, including university dormitories in downtown Seoul, corporate training facilities and sports complexes. Furthermore, organizers say that the K-pop concert could take place on Friday, August 11th, and the closing ceremony the day after at Seoul World Cup Stadium. But nothing has been confirmed yet. The government says it will take every effort to expedite the departure plan and provide all necessary resources and support for participants during their stay and until they return to their home countries safely. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
Instead, young scouts will have an opportunity to explore the Korean culture in capital Seoul and other areas. This as South Korea prepares alternative tour programs and cultural performances for the World Scout Jamboree. Our Song Yoo-jin has the details.
South Korea is scrambling to support the heat-struck World Scout Jamboree in Saemangeum. Cities across the country are stepping up with an array of tour programs. This comes after President Yoon Suk-yeol on Sunday ordered relevant government officials to coordinate alternative tours for the participants.
The president ordered to make sure scouts from the UK and the US who are staying in Seoul and Pyeongtaek continue on with their programs there. Also, 17 cities and provinces have proposed 90 cultural programs for scouts.
The British Scouts took part in a nighttime bus tour of Seoul organized by the city government on Sunday. 155 teenagers toured some of the city's key landmarks, including the Banpo-daegu Bridge and Seoul Tower and Cheonggyecheon Stream. The city will also offer trekking tours and water sports programs. The city of Pyeongtaek in the Gyeonggi-do province is putting on taekwondo and K-pop performances for the American Scout members. The southern port city of Busan is planning a bus tour around the famous Haeundae Beach and Taejongdae Park. There's also the iconic Boryong Mud Festival on the East Coast. A visit to an astronomical observatory and the National Science Museum at the country's tech capital, Daejeon. And a look around UNESCO heritage sites like the Bulguksa Temple in Gyeongju City of Gyeongsangbuk-do Province.
We've also prepared accommodation for scouts to stay elsewhere for 2 or 3 day schedules.
Meanwhile, the government has dispatched additional medical staff, air-conditioned buses, and cold water to the campsite. A total of over 330 air-conditioned buses are available, and 1,400 service personnel are working at the site. Numerous Korean companies have lent a helping hand. They include Samsung affiliates who've chipped in with mobile toilets and power generators, and LG, Hyundai, and E-Mart contributing drinks and snacks for the staff on site. 송유진, Arirang News.
Amid concerns over a sexual harassment allegation at the World Scout Jamboree, officials have announced that the alleged perpetrator has been separated from the victim. Gender Equality and Family Minister Kim Hyun-suk, who is a co-chair of the organizing committee, made the announcement Monday, adding that an additional investigation was currently underway. This follows news that some 80 South Korean scouts from the North Jeolla Province Scout Association decided to leave the Jamboree campsite, claiming that a man from Thailand allegedly walked into the female's shower room on Wednesday. However, the police say the man insists he was taking a shower because it was too hot and say it's still unclear whether he had sexual intentions. The association had earlier complained about the organizers issuing only a warning. The Korean authorities are now tightening security at local airports following a series of online posts threatening terror attacks. In the meantime, the Justice Minister says he will make efforts to take some burden off the nation's police from using necessary force to stop attackers. Kim Do-yeon has more.
As South Korea continues to recover from recent violent attacks in public places and with threats of similar attacks being made online, the nation's airports have become targets. According to Incheon International Airport Corporation and Korea Airports Corporation on Monday, 5 airports in the country have received threats so far. The police is investigating a threat made towards Incheon International last week, which said that there is a bomb in the terminal and if people evacuate, they'll be run over by a truck. Jeju, Daegu, Gimpo, and Gimhae airports have all been the subject of terrorism threats online. Authorities say they have carried out security checks on them all and have found nothing of concern. They're also tracking the authors of these posts, but with the posts being done through a different IP address from overseas, it's taking the investigators some time. Despite no signs of actual danger, the situation has prompted the security around airports to be tightened, with Incheon Airport raising its vigilance level from attention to caution, increasing patrols and tightening employee identification at entries and exits. The KAC has reinforced patrols and security at 14 airports under its jurisdiction since Sunday afternoon. Meanwhile, as citizens recover from the shock of random attacks in public places, Justice Minister Han Dong-hun has ordered the nation's prosecution to actively apply self-defense and justification rules for police and others using force to protect citizen safety. Growing concerns over safety have led to issues of police holding back from necessary physical confrontation, fearing punishment. This also comes as the nation's chief police officer recommended police officers use guns and tasers to take down a violent attacker. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea is expected to see this summer's highest power demand so far over the next 2 days. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said on Monday that electricity demand nationwide would peak at 92.9 gigawatts from today through Tuesday afternoon. Experts attributed this to Typhoon Kanoon raising temperatures as it approaches the country alongside businesses returning to full operation after summer breaks. Responding to the expected record high demand, the government is running an emergency system and has secured sufficient electrical capacity with more than 11 gigawatts of reserve power. South Korea postpones its plan to ease COVID-19 restrictions amid an increasing number of new cases over the past 6 weeks. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency has planned to downgrade the infectious disease classification for COVID-19 from level 2 to level 4, the lowest designation and equal to that for influenza. Classifying it as a level 4 disease would have lifted the remaining mask-wearing mandate at medical facilities, and COVID-19 patients would no longer require monitoring by the government. South Korea has seen a daily average of over 50,000 COVID-19 cases in the past week, which is expected to shoot up to over 70,000 in mid-August. Amid wastewater release imminent from the tsunami-wrecked Fukushima nuclear power plant into the Pacific Ocean, Japanese media outlets say the process could begin as early as this month. The South Korean government says it's up to Japan to make that final decision. Our Byeong-hun reports.
Japan plans to start releasing wastewater from its Fukushima nuclear power plant as soon as late August, according to Japan's Yomiuri and Asahi Shimbun. Citing unnamed government sources, Monday's report said the release will likely come shortly after Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida meets with U.S. President Joe Biden and South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol in Washington next week, where Kishida is expected to explain that the water is indeed safe. They also said Tokyo plans to start the discharge process before bottom trawling fishing season begins in waters off Fukushima on September 1st. In response, an official from the South Korean government said in a press briefing on Monday that the exact timing of the discharge is not something that has been officially discussed between the two countries, but added that it's up to Japan to make the final decision.
It's for Japan to decide when it should start releasing the water, but we've told them there are some technical issues through our scientific report on the matter, so Japan will likely make the decision after a comprehensive review, including looking at concerns from neighboring countries.
In the meantime, officials from South Korea and Japan held a virtual working-level meeting on Friday to further discuss Seoul's request regarding the wastewater discharge plan. The two sides held their first round of working-level talks in Tokyo in late July, after President Yoon asked Prime Minister Kishida to include South Korean experts in monitoring the Fukushima wastewater release. Byeong-hun, Arirang News.
Korea expects a gradual recovery in the economy, largely due to improvements in the manufacturing industries, especially when it comes to chip exports. Park Kwon-woo explains.
South Korea's economy is recovering from its recent contraction, mainly as outbound shipments of semiconductors are rising big. This is according to the monthly Economic Trends Report released by the Korea Development Institute on Monday. The report added that the semiconductor export volume saw an on-year increase of 21.6% in June. This was a huge hike compared to the past 2 months, as it increased 8.1% in May, while it saw a decrease of 1.3% in April, year-on-year. Along with the robust exports, smaller retreats in chip production and lower inventory rates are attributed to the expansion of the nation's economy. The KDI's report also noted that South Korea's overall industrial production recorded an on-year increase of 1.1% in June. In particular, service production rose once again by 3.5% compared to the same period last year, after rising 1.9% in the previous month. However, the Institute warned about certain global concerns that could possibly lead to the world economic slowdown. Those concerns include rising commodity prices, followed by the most recent crude oil hikes, and China's slower-than-expected economic rebound due to the base effects. Park Kwon-woo, Arirang News.
Air Force training continues amid the sizzling summer conditions here in Korea. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung takes a look at some of the unit's ways of beating the heat.
An F-15K fighter jet has just finished flying and is making its way to the shower to cool off. In the sweltering hot summer, it is important to cool off the heated jets and rinse off any salt formed when flying over the sea. While the jets cool down, pilots have to endure an apparent temperature of over 50 degrees Celsius under their pilot suits.
Fighter pilots fight head-on against the rays of the hot midsummer sun under a transparent canopy. I know that I have sweated a lot when I see my wet uniform.
Airmen and airwomen also get a short breather from the scorching heat while enjoying some papbingsu, Korean shaved ice dessert with red beans. But they are again quickly drenched with sweat as they load heavy missiles weighing more than 160 kilograms.
We are provided with short sleeves, so I wear those. There are also portable air conditioners, so I try to work while avoiding the heat.
The Air Force said it is working hard to prevent heat-related illnesses by implementing flexible flight times during heat waves at the commander's discretion. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Capital Seoul has been selected to host the next Catholic Youth Festival in 2027. Lee Seung-jae has more on the significance of this selection.
At the closing mass for the 2023 World Youth Day in Lisbon, Portugal, Pope Francis announced the host city for the next World Youth Day.
The next World Youth Day will take place in Asia. It will be in South Korea, in Seoul.
The World Youth Day brings together young people from around the world in celebration of their Catholic faith. The massive event runs for 5 or 6 days, with the reigning Pope also in attendance. Seoul will become the first Asian city to host the event since Manila in 1995, where over 5 million people attended the event's closing mass. Seoul's Archdiocese estimates that around 700,000 to 1 million Catholics will be in attendance for the Seoul World Youth Day, with 300,000 traveling to South Korea.
Since in the past 3 years we have undergone a COVID situation in Korea, sadly the number of people going to church in Korea has declined. And we sincerely hope that throughout preparations and also during World Youth Day, it will be a great opportunity to develop and mature our youth ministry. So that's what I am hoping for as our journey begins for the preparation for World Youth Day.
The announcement comes as Cardinal Andrew Yam-Soo-jung and Archbishop Peter Jung-Sung-taek of the Seoul Archdiocese traveled to Lisbon last Monday to make a pitch for Seoul. Cardinal Lazaro Yu-Hung-sik, prefect of the Congregation for the Clergy of the Holy See, and Oh Hyun-ju, the South Korean ambassador to the Holy See, also took part in the pitch. The event is also expected to provide a massive boost to the local economy. The Lisbon World Youth Day is expected to have been worth about $622 million. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. Joining us in the studio is our sports editor, Paul Need. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening.
Let's start with golf. A strong showing from An Byeong-hun on the PGA Tour. What can you tell us?
Yes, he finished tied for second at the Wyndham Championship, and this qualifies him for the playoffs as well. An Byeong-hun at the Sedgefield Country Club in Greensboro, North Carolina on Sunday local time finished at 18 under par 262, level with Russell Henley of the US and 2 strokes behind Lucas Glover, the eventual winner also of the US. This was Anne's 4th top 10 finish of the season and his second in just 3 tournaments. Anne has now moved up 15 places in the FedEx Cup rankings to 37. Up next is the St. Jude Championship in Memphis this week, which is the first of 3 playoff tournaments. Meanwhile, in the LPGA at the Scottish Open, Kim Hyo-joo on Sunday recorded her second runner-up finish of the campaign. It came following a bogey-free final round to finish 13 under 275, just 2 strokes behind winner Céline Boutier of France. It was the last tournament before the season's final major this Thursday, the AIG Women's Open in Surrey, England.
And moving on to football and Women's World Cup, tipped by many to win the tournament, the USA are out.
Yes, that's right. Beaten 5-4 on penalties by Sweden on Sunday following a goalless draw. The US dominated most of the round of 16 match, but were kept at bay by Sweden's goalkeeper, Zashira Musovic. The match then went to penalties where 3 US players missed, including Megan Rapinoe. The iconic Rapinoe, a 2-time winner herself, had come off the bench in extra time, with the US looking for a breakthrough and help the US achieve the three-peat, as it had been dubbed, 3 World Cup triumphs in a row. But Sweden's winning penalty by Lena Hurtig initially looked like it had been saved, but goal line technology confirmed that the ball had just about crossed the line. 4 other round of 16 matches will take place today, and the quarters are set to take place on August 11th and the 12th.
And to men's football now. The English season is back. It began on Sunday with the usual curtain raiser, which is the Community Shield.
Yes, you're quite right. Arsenal beat Manchester City on penalties following a 1-1 draw. It was City who took the lead, though, through Cole Palmer after 77 minutes with a wonderful curling effort, left-footed into the top corner. But Arsenal pegged City back deep into injury time. Leandro Trossard's deflected strike sent the game into extra time and then penalties, which Arsenal won 4-1. A Super Cup of sorts, the match sees the league champions take on the FA Cup winners from the season before. But when the same team wins both trophies, the team that finished runner-up in the league faces the reigning champions, as was the case this year, owing to Man City's trophy-laden campaign last year.
All right, thanks for that, Paul. See you next week.
Thank you. See you.
Hot spells will continue for inland regions, while heavy downpours are expected for Gangwon-do province tonight. Torrential downpours of up to 200 millimeters are expected. The surrounding regions, including the coastlines of Gyeongsang-do province, will see 5 to 60 millimeters. For those across low-lying areas, please take extra precautions against potential landslides or flooding. In the meantime, for the weather conditions in Byeong-hun County, sweltering temperatures will prevail. Baking hot conditions are once again expected with highs of 36 degrees Celsius. On and off showers may follow for the daytime. Meanwhile, the 6th typhoon of the season, Typhoon Kanoon, is forecast to turn back and pass through South Korea. As for the current trajectory, it is set to make landfall on South Korea's southern coastline later this week. Therefore, by Thursday, the entire nation will be under the influence of this typhoon. Tropical nights will continue for most regions. Seoul and Busan will be starting off at 27 degrees. Showers will become more widespread by the daytime. Seoul will get up to 35, Gwangju 37, Daegu and Busan will be topping out at 34 degrees. Between Wednesday and Friday, the entire nation will see showers. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
I'm live.
저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션 분들
아무리 봐도 텐션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고.
좋아요.
Busan, Korea is already reaching the entire world, like ocean waves that travel far and wide. It's Busan, the perfect World Expo city, transforming our world, navigating toward a better future.
Try out the wide assortment of bingsus and find one which suits your taste buds. Bon appetit!
Hello everyone, it's Monday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Over the weekend, in the city of Jeddah, Saudi Arabia hosted talks aiming at finding a peaceful settlement to the war in Ukraine. Though some European sources say there had been agreement on some key points, the conference could not come up with any final declaration. However, what is noteworthy is that the talks showed Saudi Arabia's growing prominence in international affairs by drawing around 40 countries, including members of the BRICS bloc, besides Russia, Brazil, India, China, and South Africa. What significance did this meeting have, and what is the latest on the Ukrainian war? To discuss this, we invite Professor Pan Gil-ju at the Ilmin International Relations Institute of Korea University. Professor Pan, welcome to the show.
Good evening.
Good evening. And we also have Professor John Blexland from the Australian National University. Professor Blexland, thank you for your time.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me on the program.
Thank you. Now, Professor Pan, first question to you. The weekend's meeting of national security advisors and other senior officials from around 40 countries, but not Russia, aimed to reach an agreement on how to end the conflict in Ukraine. Now, before we delve deeper into the details, what was the significance of this meeting?
Well, unfortunately, it has been almost 1.5 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. So how to end military fight needs to be carefully taken into consideration. Actually, it was already late. Anyhow, I would like to point out the significance of this meeting in 4 ways. First of all, this meeting is significant in the sense that the methodology of military fight termination was dealt with in a serious way by external players. External actors' role in initiating how to end this fight are pivotal in a situation where direct players in this war, Russia and Ukraine, make it hard to get things started. So I would say that there are 2 ways of ending military fights. One is to make fights temporarily stop, which is an armistice. It is a way similar to the case of Korea, which was made under the Korean Armistice Agreement in 1953. The other is to end the war permanently, simply beyond an armistice. Anyhow, I believe discussing itself was important. Second, this meeting filled the gap created by the non-function of UN Security Council. Collective security come to a halt because, ironically, an invader was a permanent member of UN Security Council, which is Russia. So another international entity needed to fill this gap. I think this meeting did those roles in some ways. Since the international organizations remain little function under the the new Cold War, substituting entities like this one are more likely to emerge as time goes by. Third, it might serve as an opportunity for mitigating the new Cold War dynamics in the sense that the 2 great powers under the new Cold War, the United States and China, all together joined in this meeting. I do think this meeting is helpful for encouraging the discourse of de-risking, not the discourse of decoupling. Finally, this meeting showed how an aggressor is excluded from international meetings by ruling out Russia. This exclusion can be defined as diplomatic punishment or diplomatic sanction, which has continued to go on since last year. This signal can contribute to preserving rules-based international order by punishing a revisionist. So all in all, I would say that this meeting turned out to be substantial in some way, as well as symbolic.
Right, I see. So the peace summit was indeed significant in many ways. Now, Professor Blexland, Ukraine's aim for the meeting was to build a bigger coalition of diplomatic support beyond just Western allies, but reaching out to other countries as well. And specifically, the Ukrainian president said he was hoping for more support for his own peace formula. Now, what is his peace formula about?
So, thank you. Yes, Zelensky's peace formula has been articulated since 2022. It's a 10-point peace plan. It involves nuclear security, ecological security, food security, a range of other securities. And of course, what it does also, it demands the withdrawal of Russian forces, some kind of mechanism to ensure that there is accountability for past injustice and a peace agreement. And that is just intolerable to Vladimir Putin. So his peace plan is a tall order for the Russians. It's, from the Western point of view, completely reasonable, but not likely to be successful. And that's why conferences like this one at Jeddah are so important, because it gives Vladimir Zelensky a platform to engage with other erstwhile security partners and economic partners of Russia to try and persuade them to actually wean them off their reliance on Russia and get them more and more on side, because we've had a real challenge where the global south, what we used to call the third world, has been unsurprisingly sympathetic to the Russian view. That seems to be changing, in part because of Russia's accelerated and increased engagement on blocking food supply, which is, of course, very, very disconcerting and unnerving for many people in Africa who've been reliant on trade supplies coming from Ukraine.
Right, I see. Now, that being said, Professor Bond, do you believe the peace summit was successful enough for Ukraine to receive more support for Zelensky's peace formula? I mean, what was the position of countries, especially from the BRICS, Brazil, India, China, and South Africa?
To be honest, it is true that Ukraine needs more support from more countries than the ones which attended this meeting if Zelensky's peace formula is going to be successful. In this meeting, however, contributed to moving forward on that journey. The greatest outcome is that they agreed to launch a working group and discuss agendas of peace formula suggested by President Zelensky. Furthermore, this meeting turned out to increase the possibility to hold the Ukraine Peace Summit around the end of this year. This meeting is meaningful from a viewpoint of international politics as well. As noted earlier, China joined this meeting, although it was far from its significant change of attitude towards the Russia and Ukraine war. At least China showed its willingness to address this puzzle rather than simply strengthening solidarity with Russia. States which belong to the global south, such as India, Brazil, and South American countries, had kept their position to be on the side of neither Russia nor Ukraine. That explains why President Zelensky attended the G7 meeting in Hiroshima to ask for more help to more countries in a situation where India and Indonesia, as well as G7 countries, joined the summit. So what matters is that China defines itself as a member of the global south, although it is ranked second in economic power and second or third in military power. This definition is made partly because it helps China be more cooperative with the global south in its effort to seize the initiative of the new corridor mechanism. Since China is recognized as a leading country in the global south, in this sense, its attendance could help more support from the global south. Similarly, China's attendance might have a positive impact on India's decision to join this meeting. But at the same time, its attendance does not mean that its no relations with Russia are going to be changed anytime soon, because China intended to increase its international leverage and maximize its international national interests by joining this meeting.
Right, I see. Though we would have to wait and see. The fact that the meeting have opened up a possibility of doing the peaceful settlement by more than 40 countries, including China, does seem really significant. Now, Professor Blacksland, another noteworthy part is that talks over this peaceful settlement were held in Saudi Arabia's ancient Red Sea port city of Jeddah, with the king in waiting, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, hosting the event. What is behind these efforts by MBS to discuss peace?
Great question. So there's, mixed motives here for MBS. Mohammed bin Salman, he's the leader of Saudi Arabia effectively. He's in a very powerful position. He, of course, has, when President Biden was in the running for election, he was previously quite critical of MBS, it's very interesting to see Saudi Arabia try and make the Americans squirm over the power that Saudi Arabia seems to have gathered. Clearly, oil is a factor. They want stable oil prices. But Saudi Arabia is playing a linchpin role in facilitating negotiations and engaging with China, with Iran, with Russia, with the global South. This is the kind of pulling power that used to be the remit of the United States pretty much on its own. That is no longer the case, and this has got to be galling for the United States. So I suspect on one level, this is something the Russians are happy to see take place because it takes away from credit to the United States. But on another level, the Saudi Arabians, they're not exactly friends with Russia. Their relationship is all very much calculated and all about what's in the interests of Saudi Arabia and MBS in particular. So when we think about what's at play here, this is giving Saudi Arabia considerable additional leverage on the world stage in negotiations with the United States over arms, with Israel over its relationship in the region, with the Gulf states in terms of its priority agenda items and getting the Gulf states to be more, under the direction, if you like, indirectly and informally from Saudi Arabia, and also sending a message to, its erstwhile, enemy, the Iranians. So there's a lot of dimensions here, a lot of dynamics at play that are more than just about the war in Ukraine when it comes to what's in it for Saudi Arabia, that's for sure.
Right, I see Saudi Arabia playing a linchpin role. Now, Professor Byeong-hun, I'd like to ask you as well. So how do you see the view that Saudi Arabia is being at the confluence of competing global interests?
Tricky but important questions. So I believe MBS attempts to have an increased leverage, to say the least. I think MBS wanted to show its presence in international politics to domestic audiences as well as international audiences, to be more recognized as an influential leader. That explains why Saudi Arabia suggested and hosted this meeting. Meanwhile, international society, the United States, and even China had no excuse to oppose this meeting because China is not a direct player in this war, and it is a powerful actor in the Arab League. These days, MBS is eager to make Saudi enhance diplomatic autonomy and be a major player around the world. MBS seems to think that his strategy is working so far by making high-ranking officials of the United States, such as Secretary of State Blinken, even President Biden, stop by Saudi Arabia and meet him. I think his plan seems to work because he takes advantage of the new Cold War, which means the U.S. China are highly competitive. MBS seems to show that he can play a meaningful role in international challenges like the Russia-Ukraine war. Earlier, last fall, he was eager to play a role in releasing Western mercenaries captured by Russian armies in the Ukraine battlefield. If this role was tactical back then, hosting this event now is more strategy, in the sense that around 40 states gathered in Saudi Arabia to make the peace formula be established in a unified way. In short, Saudi's role seems to enhance its strategic leverage in international politics.
Right, I see. So Saudi Arabia is definitely trying to boost its diplomatic autonomy. Now, Professor Byeong-hun, meanwhile, Ukraine started consultations with the U.S. over providing security guarantees for the country pending the completion of the process of joining NATO. Now, how is that expected to develop?
Well, I think it is expected to strengthen Ukraine's military capabilities and increase credibility for support of international society. As you are well aware, at the NATO summit in Lithuania, the United States laid out the key principle of Ukraine's membership to NATO, which is condition-based. What is it? Is a membership will neither automatic nor fast, which means the procedure will be taken with a degree of Ukraine's preparedness. The condition-based principle was intended to stop NATO countries from being divided and Russia from making an excuse to invade countries beyond Ukraine. But at the same time, the United States did not want to make Russia misperceive its approach as a signal of abandoning Ukraine or reducing its support. So the United States is willing to provide security guarantees for Kyiv pending the competition of the process for Ukraine to be an official member of NATO. Actually, the group of 7, simply beyond the United States, pledged these guarantees at the NATO summit. This consultation has started to make this plan done in reality. Although how to do that remains to be seen, it seems to focus more on enhancing Ukraine's capabilities to defeat and restrain Russian provocations and aggressions. In line with this, the Western group pledged to provide more weapons at the NATO summit. One thing seems for sure. This consultation is most likely to bolster Ukraine's military capabilities. Furthermore, this approach could help Ukraine continue to conduct the counteroffensive.
Right, I see. Now, Professor Blackland, moving on to the recent drone attacks. Now, we have seen Ukrainian sea drones attack 2 Russian ships in the Black Sea recently, one striking a Russian naval ship, another striking country's biggest oil tankers. Now, many say through these attacks, Ukraine is opening up a new frontier by unleashing such powerful maritime drones. How do you see this view?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting turn of events because for a long time we've been distracted by the apparent World War I-like tactics along Donetsk and on the battle around Bakhmut and the attempts for the Ukrainian forces to break through to Melitopol and down to the Sea of Azov to cut off the Russian forces in Crimea. And I think that still broadly is the case. But what we're also seeing is multifaceted engagement. And the Ukrainians are using everything at their disposal. They've been developing their own homegrown drone systems. They've accessed great American and British and other European and allied technology. And they are being innovative with the drones striking the ships in harbour, with the air drones striking bridges, blocking off key passages of communications or lines of communication, supply lines through from Russia via the Kerch Bridge and other supporting bridges that are necessary to get supplies, food, logistics, fuel, ammunition to the front lines to sustain the Russian forces. So the Ukrainians have been playing a multifaceted game via sea, unsettling the Crimean Russians, by air, blocking the lines of communication, the logistic resupply lines, and on the front line probing as well. This is all with a view to undermine Russian resolve, weaken their logistic support, make it more difficult for them to sustain operations in, I think, the hope that eventually, along the way, with this multiple pronged attacks from air, from sea, from land, in the cyberspace and in the information space, as we saw in the summit in Jeddah, undermine Russian resolve, weaken their ability to hold the line in southern Ukraine and around Crimea, and give the Ukrainians the ability to break through this very, very tough, multi-layered defensive line and enable them, once they've done that, to get through quickly, premised on the understanding that the logistic support for the Russians is weakened, the morale is broken, and the line of defense is breached. All of those combined are the expectation that while things haven't happened as rapidly as some might have hoped, we might yet see in the weeks and months ahead a crumbling of Russian ability to hold the line that enables the Ukrainians to break through and get through to the coast, to the Sea of Azov, and in so doing cut the lines of communication, cut the supply lines, break morale, and hopefully give them, by the end of the summer fighting season, a stranglehold over the Russian positions in the south and significantly weaken them in the east to the point where they get a strong enough position to win the information battle with the rest of the West. In other words, getting the West to continue resupply coming with the global south, so that they'll feel that the Ukrainians are the underdogs, that they should be supporting, and that the Russians are the bully boys who are breaking up the global food supply chain, and of course having the effect on Russian domestic political resolve as well. Multifaceted on the ground, multifaceted information domain, and of course the key one is the 15 centimetres between the ears of Vladimir Putin. That's where they're trying to shape things as well.
All right, I see. Very interesting. Ukraine playing multifaceted game right now. All right, now, Professor Byeong-hun, I'd like to also tap on this, the reason behind such Ukraine's escalated maritime drone operations. It seems that it has escalated since Russia pulled out of the, Black Sea Grain Initiative last month. Now, how are global food prices being affected by Russia pulling out of the deal? And what kind of other issues is this causing?
Well, it is a real sad story from a viewpoint of human and human evolution. As Russia has deadlocked on the battlefield, it started again using food as weapons by terminating the grain deal. This is the reality. This contamination has already been a negative impact on food security in the sense that food prices went up last month around the world. As you know, 400 million people are reliant on grain from Ukraine. So global food security could be at stake, particularly in the areas of Africa and the Middle East. To top it up, if global food prices go up, it will encourage other inflation as well. What matters is that this termination is more likely to affect people in developing countries than the ones of developed countries. So the global north needs to put more emphasis on helping people from the global south in order to enhance its food security. Without addressing this gap between the global north and the global south, international cohesion to make this war terminated is likely to be weaker. Food weaponization is a lousy example in international politics because export has been made fully throughout history, even at war. In this aspect, as of right now, international politics is under the mechanism of complex security, which means all type of security is interconnected, ranging from food security to even to nuclear security. Anyhow, finding another way of exporting Ukraine's the grain is most likely to get significant in order to neutralize Russia's intentions of food weaponization.
Right, I see. Now, we are running out of time, but I'd like to ask this last question to our Professor Blexland. Professor, Russia's killing of the Ukraine grain deal is apparently having a boomerang effect on Russia, as African leaders could not be wooed despite Russia's efforts to extend its influence across the global south, as shown through the second Russia-Africa summit. Now, how do you believe this issue is to develop further?
So the attack on the port facilities at Odessa and the grain silos there, and on the banks of the Danube River, these are being broadcast globally. This is sending a message to the world that Russia really doesn't give a damn about the food situation globally, and that its priority is itself, and most particularly the ambitions of Vladimir Putin. And so what I think is happening is that while there's been a kind of strong reaction in the global south against the United States over the years and against the West, and the Russians, particularly thanks to the work of the Wagner Group and other militia groups, and Russia's attempt to co-opt and invest in African countries where there are critical minerals and resources, they have been able to persuade several of these African states and others in the global south that Russia is really the underdog. But that narrative has really worn down. So what's happened in Odessa and on the Danube with the grain silos is really having a toxic effect in terms of the goodwill that remains for Russia.
Right, I see. Now, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition, but thank you, Professor Byeong-hun and Professor Blexland, for your time and your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
Biz Accelerators. Smart Biz Accelerators introduces Korea's small and medium-sized companies that have developed high-tech products in the global market. Here, you can discover not only their success strategies and ambition, but also the impressive development